block height is 868281. You, according to Time Chain Calendar, you are listening to the one and only Art of Freedom here today on All Days. A very special day for us Bitcoiners. It's White Paper Day, and hope you all are having a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. And in this incredible day where Satoshi blessed us with his magnum opus, and that has spurred this incredible revolution that we call Bitcoin. And it's an absolute joy for today to have such amazing guests. We have Fractal Encrypt on the show, and he's going to be on very, very shortly. First of all, though, we need to say hi to Flo, who's the co-host. How are you doing, Flo?
Hey, Rebel, I'm doing super good. How are you doing?
I'm great. Are you out in Argentina at the moment?
Yes, I really recommend everyone should see this city. It's so beautiful, so full of life. It has like kind of a European beauty, but the I don't know liveliness of the Latin American people. So it's really really special.
Fantastic. And what are you doing out there at the moment? Are you exhibiting art out there?
I'm participating in a contest, yeah, for a conference. The conference is not like my favorite. It's not very focused on Bitcoin. They accept a lot of different stuff, but it's fun. And yeah, I applied the two pieces of art for a contest, and I'm also gonna be part of a panel and talking about fiat art and Bitcoin art, and we'll see how that one goes.
Oh, that's really exciting. Nice one, Flo. You have to give us the whole lowdown on the show next week. And Argentina is one of the places I've always wanted to go. Some incredible steak out there, apparently. So hopefully you get some when you're out there. All right. So without further ado, onto the main event. You might have heard of our guest today. He's an artist, really, that has kind of taken Bitcoin art to new levels, inspired many Bitcoin artists, not only through his art himself, but also the events that he's put on. And we can even say like the Art of Freedom was born in a conversation in an art gallery in Madeira. So this show wouldn't technically exist without his contributions to the Bitcoin art space. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome Mr. Fractal Encrypt to the Art of Freedom. How are you doing, sir? Bear with us 2 seconds. Wonderful technical difficulties here. Even Satoshi didn't get it right the first time. So let's see if we can do that. Right. Fractal, can you hear us? And if you unmute your microphone, hopefully we can hear you as well. Oh, so can you hear background noise? Is that you, Flo?
Yeah, sorry. I was wondering if I was not listening right because I have some technical problems sometimes, or if it's something else.
Let's see. Here we go. I've said you can speak. Oh, they've got the mic on. Hang on a minute. So if you try unmuting now, mate, that might do the job. I'm hoping.
All right. So are you able to hear me now?
We most certainly are. Hello, sir. How
Oh,
are you doing?
fantastic. Okay, I'm doing great. Doing great. Thanks
Thank
for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, especially on this incredible day. And when we contacted you, it must have been over a month ago now, to get you on the show. I couldn't think of any of a more apt guest to have on White Paper Day. So thank you very much for joining us.
Absolutely. I know it's kind of off schedule, so I appreciate y'all accommodating that. And I think it's certainly a great day to talk Bitcoin and art and creation and whatnot. So it's all kind of started here. So I think the idea being planted in this kind of point in time is a nice place for us to just kind of contemplate it all and our place in this new kind of world that we're all building together.
I agree. It is incredible, and all the artists that we have in here, and we have an awful lot of artists in here. You know, we gather together under this incredible banner, this revolution that is going forward, and inspired by obviously the Bitcoin white paper was the genesis for that. What does the Bitcoin white paper mean to you?
I mean, I think to me, the Bitcoin white paper is one of those foundational documents. To me, it's like it's our own version of the Ten Commandments in a way. It's something that was kind of passed down to us from someone that we can no longer contact, and it's just interesting as a historical document in all kinds of ways. I've used it in my art. I've basically taken all the equations that Satoshi put in the white paper and wrapped them around stuff and basically played around with a lot of the graphics that he gave us from his technical paper, and there's actually a lot of beauty within it. So and I'm certainly not the only one. There's tons of artists that have done everything from simply print the white paper out, and that is in different media is art in itself. We see really cool like laser engravings on steel of the white paper with actually no other design done to it, and that in itself is a very interesting and classy statement. But I am kind of tuned into the Bitcoin art scene. I always am looking around just to see what people are doing and what's creative, because it's all a one big melting pot. We're all kind of inspired by each other and learning from each other and kind of pulling ideas into our own creations from what we find in the Bitcoin sphere. And so, yeah, I've definitely seen a lot of other artists that do a lot more interesting white paper art than I have done, for sure. But I think we all can take our own inspiration from it. It's certainly a historically significant moment. Like you said, this show wouldn't be here if not for a conversation that happened in a gallery that happened because of Bitcoin in the first place. So it's like all these things connect us back through this one string. It goes back farther than the Genesis block. The Genesis block, of course, most of us think of as being day zero, but realistically, like the white paper was really when the world was kind of led into the idea. I think you have to have the idea before you can create the infrastructure, and we've just seen that in play here.
And it's incredible how it's playing out and propagating now all over the world. You mentioned there that it's kind of like a incredibly important cultural document. Do you see Bitcoin kind of going kind of the way of a religion in the future? I know that in my work in particular, another artist as well in this group. So Ariel Birdie, who was on the show, she's kind of put imagery, religious imagery, next to Bitcoin imagery as a way of kind of trying to interpret the white paper and Satoshi's work. Do you think Bitcoin is tending towards a religion, or is it the cult, as it's kind of jokingly said amongst all the memers?
Well, people used to share, well, they still do, pictures of my art and say, it's not a cult. And I kind of lean into that in the sense that I feel that, yes, there is something deeply religious and spiritual and profound going on both a personal level for me, as well as like anybody who kind of lets this kind of thinking into their world. And that is worth memorializing and, kind of creating our own monuments too. So I think that in essence, all of us Bitcoin artists are decorating the temple, and it's just a matter of time before the real temple is built. Who knows who's going to be the one to do it, but I certainly see Bitcoin, and it's not. It's almost Bitcoin not as a religion, but Bitcoin is a spiritual practice. So you know, it's not that there's something to worship, but it's just kind of fine. It's like entheogenic in the way of manifesting the divine within. So you know, we all kind of grow into the people that we would want to be through interacting with the network in like a very genuine and realistic and humble way. You know, like you can learn from the lessons that kind of Bitcoin teaches. It's a harsh master and a harsh teacher at times, but certainly if you're paying attention, you can integrate these lessons into your life and actually benefit and kind of transform who you are, your family's life, your life, and just everything through this new mechanism. So I certainly think there's something religious about that. I don't know.
Hey, Fractal, how are you? Um,
I'm good.
I agree with you. I think it also has, there is something about the very clean start it has, like posting, for example, this white paper before running the actual code, or like letting people know, and how yeah, how clean it all was, that it, I think it also contributes to this I don't know if it's of mysticism or like, I don't know, but it's a spiritual way. And it's very interesting, yeah, how you said it. And I had never thought of like, when I'm doing the art, of thinking where it's gonna end. Like, I just do it. But when I admire other artists' pieces, I do tend to think of that, like, and in the case of your particular work, I was very always admired like the level of detail. And also like they are so big, so you can like kind of immerse yourself when you are contemplating them. I've been very lucky to see two of your pieces live, and it's interesting in that way, but also like weird how like people, do you think it could be taken like in a negative way when they say like to think about this as more of a cult or religion, or yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, certainly, I think it's being presented in a negative way, and most of the times when they say that, you know, like a lot of times it's not said in a jokingly kind way. It's actually meant to be derogatory, but I don't actually take it that way because I think it just kind of it's saying that, you know, it's kind of reaching the level of religious art, but they just think I'm pointing it at something ridiculous. But I just feel like that's not my problem. That's a disconnect for that person in terms of where they have their values set. But they actually are still recognizing that this is somewhat interesting artwork. So I do take it as an interesting backhanded compliment. But I also think that, like I said, I do think that that treating it as almost religious art, like kind of making something that you would want to be put inside a temple somewhere, some altar or something, like that's kind of a cool vibe to go with. So I certainly like you know, creating with that in mind.
I always imagined kind of the fractal encrypt, and the fractal encrypt I know, and most people know, is this artist who's incredibly meticulous, incredibly insightful, many layers in their work, and just an absolute joy to behold and discover and explore. I'm just wondering, Fred, was it always that way with your art, and kind of how have you developed as an artist? Because I've only known you since since you've got the full node sculptures, etc. What about your previous kind of road as an artist up to where you are today?
Okay, well, interesting question. I'm actually sitting in a room that has two of my very old canvas drawings, kind of before I found Bitcoin. So this is an easy question to answer. And the art that I make is self-similar in a way, like where I kind of like to work with certain motifs and play off of those same things over time. And I kind of still use some of those things today, that I'm looking at something that I did in 2012, and it has elements that are very similar, even though technically I think increased my skills significantly since 13 years ago. There's an unquestionable lineage that ties that piece to the next one, to the next one, to what I'm currently doing, and some of that is really just trying to tell stories through art. You know, like I always loved things like hieroglyphics or the Mayan glyphs that you see, or the Mayan calendar, or Egyptian hieroglyphs that you see, where it's not like an arbitrary design. Yes, it's beautiful, but it's not just you can just assign any meaning you want to it, or oh, it's like abstract art, like maybe it means this or maybe it means that. Like there is a very specific meaning for each line that's placed on this drawing, and they all mean something, and there's a reason for it, and there's a story here. And this is something that I think is interesting to me, and I think it might be interesting to you. And I think that's like the way that I use art as a storytelling medium, just to find like what's interesting to me and then project that out into the world. And the interesting thing is that brings people that are like-minded back into my auric field, if you want to call it. It's not really the right word, but my like into my sphere of influence. Like it brings the like-minded folk to me, which is great, because then we can interact and have good conversations that are deep and not surface level, and life becomes more interesting. So I think like all that manifests through art. But the other side of it is like there's a bit of revolutionary in the art as well, because some of the art that I make, it's like you encode this information in there because it's a little bit of a sly roundabout way to hide information and ideas that may be somewhat countercultural or somewhat not accepted right now by the mainstream, and in some cases could even be threatened or persecuted, or you get thrown in jail for thinking that or writing that or saying that or whatever. So hiding it in the art is actually a very interesting way of maybe preserving information in a different way. It doesn't always work. We see how, in certain cultures they destroy all the old monuments, all the old art. They understand this technique of hiding subversive information in art. But I continue the tradition today.
And how much subverted information is in your art then?
Well, like for example, the one that I'm looking at now is one from prior to Bitcoin art. I did a lot of psychedelic art, and I see the Bitcoin art that I do is like a continuation of the psychedelic art that I did, because I felt like psychedelics are a misunderstood tool that humanity has been gifted with, but it's just misunderstood, persecuted, and kind of subject to a lot of wrongthink. And people don't realize, hey, this is a healthy, wholesome family values type thing that can help you, as a human being. They actually think it's bad for you. And it's actually just one of these revolutionary technologies that you can use to better your life. And Bitcoin is the same thing. I even wrote a whole article about psychedelics and Bitcoin and why these are complementary tools for self-sovereignty, tools that any individual can use to just become more self-sovereign, through these technologies that are gifted to us. So basically both open source things. So uh, that was kind of a preamble to say within the art, I would actually encode things like my LSD mandala. It has explicit instructions on how to create 3.1 grams of crystal LSD. So if you do that, that's 31,000 doses of LSD. And it just follows the original Alexander Shulgin method, which is back from 1981. So I just basically divided that into 25 graphic panels, and actually had like a chemist kind of help me figure out what each of the images would be to describe that process appropriately. And that's just within the design. And there's a whole bunch of other things in the design as well. But it's just the exact synthesis process, exactly as it's described in the patent, basically is here as well, just in case, hey, they ever take the internet away from us, we have this information encoded in the art.
That's truly mind blowing. That is absolutely incredible. So this whole kind of, I suppose, is it inner journey? I guess you must have been on several inner journeys before discovering Bitcoin, and then when you discovered Bitcoin, did that then just was that kind of like a natural kind of progression for you, or just something that just made complete and utter sense from your experiences with psychedelics?
Well, the two tied together intimately, because one, I became exposed to Bitcoin very early on because of the Silk Road. I happened to just be a moderator on like an old psychedelics forum that it still exists today. And I was the moderator of the news forum, so we were always seeing in news stories about Bitcoin, and I even looked up like what it was and how to get it, and it was just very weird and sketchy, and like you had to like go to an ATM in New York with a hoodie and send like money to Japan or something in Mount Gox was basically the way to get it back then, and so I never did that. I just thought it was. I didn't actually understand what it was or think it was cool, but that was my first coming across it. It was directly tied to psychedelics, and then years later, it was art and psychedelics again that brought me to Bitcoin. I sold art and had made sheets of LSD blotter art from my art, and a guy in Brazil wanted to buy a bunch of the sheets, but there was like no way for him to send me money at the time. There was like no PayPal from Brazil to America and no bank or anything. So he said, "Hey, can I pay you in Bitcoin?" And this was like 2015, so I had already heard about it like 5 years before. I was like, okay, sure, fine, you can do that. I just don't know what it is, and I don't know how to accept it. So he walked me through setting up a internet crazy internet angels that kind of helped me on my path. And then once I had it, then it was just a matter of like forgetting about it for a little while, and then like a few more touch points. Then it was like, oh yeah, hey, this exists. And again, it took some wrong think and some recalibrating of my own personal journey. Like I first found the Bitcoin scene, I guess, around like the end of 2017. And it was like heavily shitcoin influenced at the time. So I was like kind of placed right in the middle of shitcoin central as like an unknowing noob. And I pretty much fell for every trick in the book at first. And I do value that education. And I keep it dear to my heart to this day.
Yes, it's really important. It's almost like a rite of passage, isn't it, for any Bitcoiner? You kind of got to touch the stove, see what's going on, and then realize exactly Bitcoin is the correct path. When I'm wondering, Fractal, when did you kind of decide like to make Bitcoin art and become a Bitcoin artist? I mean, yeah, I suppose how that's a question like how do you decide to become a Bitcoin artist? But well, when was it for you? When did it kind of you thought, right, no, I'm going to do this and I'm going to celebrate Bitcoin through my creative ways?
It's a very like definite and like identifiable point of my life for me. So it's an easy question in terms of like I definitely have this outline and map because it's just so clear in my history when it happened. And this kind of ties back into that 2017 entry into the scene. Was one of the first lies that you're told is that Ethereum is going to be the future of art and your art will be on the blockchain forever, and it's these sovereign tokens that no one else can control and you're in control of it, and it lasts forever, all this stuff. And I went along with it at first, and I started believing it, and I was actually making all these NFTs and selling them. But it was always a little weird. I just didn't really understand why people wanted this form of art. It just didn't really click for me yet as to what it was exactly. So I always wanted to look deeper, and I'm very technical with everything that I do. So I just started like looking at the code of the smart contracts that actually defined these NFTs that I was making, and I was actually like really horrified when I started looking at it because there was just red flag after red flag, and they're not like weird esoteric things either. There was like very obvious, like anybody can understand these issues. Like at the very top of every contract, there was like an admin key, meaning my tokens weren't sovereign at all. Like the stuff that I was creating was actually subject to someone else that had this admin key. Could be some dude in his underwear in New York City drinking a beer, like could reassign my tokens of art to his buddies without any permission from me, and there's nothing I could do about it. There's also like pause features in the contracts, which they put a pause feature because what if our smart contract fucks up and it like issues tokens that it shouldn't, or it does like some unexpected behavior? But that's like the antithesis of Bitcoin. You don't put a pause feature in Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin doesn't pause. You just you deal with the consequences of your actions. So those are just two examples. There's just so many, but basically the more I went through, the more I became like horrified with the situation. And you have to like come to a self-realization that like if you're participating in this, you're either complicit or stupid. So I basically migrated from stupid to partially complicit, and then I was like, okay, well, I actually have to just cannot do this anymore. Like I need to like find what's real and focus on that. And um this period was, I guess, like late, or not late, it was like early to 2019 when I was kind of going through this examination of the code phase and this transformation of my understanding of what it was and what I was doing, and what I was being told and how I felt about all that. And it was just very, it was almost like an intense rejection. Like some people will say like, hey, you've overcorrected, like, now you just really don't like that stuff a lot. But it's like, it's just because I was there. I kind of had people telling me what it was, but actually the fact is that the whole NFT scene was a really weird psyop, because these people create free money out of thin air. You just print your shitcoin tokens, and then you use these tokens to basically incentivize artists by paying them for these NFTs, which are really nothing, and you're giving them free money, which is nothing to you, but it's actually something to them that they can then use to feed their family. So then they become beholden to these weird shitcoin pyramids, and they think that these things are helping their family, and they start, basically becoming advertising for the shitcoin chain. They're basically creating utility for the underlying base layer, and the whole thing is like a scam top to bottom. And so long story short, I basically came to this realization and was like, I just need to focus on the Bitcoin thing and see like if there's something there. And I stopped doing the NFTs, and I actually had gone to this the Bitcoin conference they did in San Francisco in 2019, and it was right near Haight Ashbury. So I had taken some LSD. I was walking around that, the Hippie Hill area, in between the lunch from the conference. Went back and then went to this BitDevs event, and somebody had mentioned at the conference the clock and calendar like nature of Bitcoin, and it gave me like the first inklings of the vision of the full node sculpture. And that was basically the beginning of my journey into Bitcoin art, because once I had that vision, I basically just disconnected from the NFT world and just kind of hid away in my my art lab, and started designing this thing. And it took me all the way from that July when the conference happened till Genesis Day was when I released it, which was 6-7 months later. And it basically took all that time of me just working alone on something that I didn't know if anybody cared about, it had any value to anybody, if anybody, if this was just going to be anything at all, or just, stupid. You have no idea till you actually make it, what it looks like. But it kind of took over my life, and I just started going all in on it. And during this time, there was a lot of questioning and self-doubt, because the NFT scene at that time started really pumping, and like a lot of the artists that I was friends with at the time and selling these little cartoons with, now these cartoons are going for $30,000-$40,000 and stuff. So it's like you're really questioning yourself. It's like, because I wasn't doing any of that, I wasn't selling any of that, I was just sitting in my room working on this physical art now, and I had basically forsaken the whole digital art thing. And while I was doing that, the universe was kind of pushing in my face this success that I was missing out on, in quotes. So it was like really like a test of integrity, I guess you could call it. And just, you went through all this uncertainty, but then when I actually released a video of like, hey, this is something I'm working on Genesis Day, it was basically finished at that point. That was what I was striving for. It's like, I want to be done by this date. I'm all about, doing things by the numbers and making things significant. So I wanted it done by Genesis Day, which it was, of 2020. When I released a video, it was just overwhelming, the level of support I got. And, that just basically validated the whole past 7 months that I spent hiding away, just wondering and questioning myself. And I kind of realized that, wow, like if this is the support that they give me from like not knowing if I could do anything cool, then if people actually support me and know what we're doing, then like how far can we actually take this? So like now I'm just on the mission to just see how amazing we can actually make Bitcoin art, and what barriers do we think are in our way that we need to knock down and create that too.
It's an amazing story, Fractal, and I love to hear how the road you had to went by. And for me, it's been super. Like since I follow you, and I've been following people who went all on these very difficult roads. It's very like nutritive. Like I learn a lot, and I think you and many Bitcoiners have saved me from going into roads that are very hard, and I appreciate that very much. Before we continue, I wanted to remind everyone that if you want to ask a question, you can write it down in the comments, or you can also join the conversation with us. And in that regard, we have one question from Volatile21, who is asking if there's a place to see your prayer art, your psychedelic art that was before Bitcoin.
Well, that's a good question. I actually don't have a good repository of my old art. No. Yeah, I think on YouTube there's if you look up the LSD mandala, the old artist name that I used to go under was under Shamanic Harmonics. You may be able to find some of the stuff hidden on the internet, but there's no localized gallery I have of it, unfortunately.
Thanks for that, Fractal. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see some of your prior Bitcoin work, because I only know the Fractal Encrypt in Bitcoin, and to see that the kind of the growth would be fascinating. To lock yourself away for 7 months, the conviction you must have had, that is insane. That's kind of like Zen monk levels of just kind of going at something. How did you like? How did you sit there and you must have been obviously the doubt there, but what was pushing you forward? There must have been some kind of force or inspiration that pushed you forward through those, I suppose, not well, potentially difficult 7 months.
Well, I think a lot of you can probably relate to this because first you have an idea and you don't know if you can execute it. So, like at first I had the vision, and then also I didn't know if it made sense at all yet either. Like, okay, it's got a clock and calendar like nature, but can you really like turn this thing into a Mayan calendar type thing? Like, there's a lot of technical steps that have to happen before the creative steps can happen. Meaning, I had to actually jump into Excel and start pulling out like a map of all the numbers. Like, how does this all like lay out? Like how do things map to each other, and where are the relationships that I need to tie together? Like, how does this thing where are the interesting data points? And as I started doing that, it just caught my attention, and I was like, holy shit. I was like, this is really amazing. Not only is it elegant and beautifully crafted, but there's a really harmonious order to the whole thing. And I like at that point it transformed again. So okay, first it was an idea. Now it's like, wow, this idea has merit, and not only that, but it actually, I think that there's something interesting here to work with. So at that point, it's just a matter of saying, like, how do you translate this from an interesting thought in your head to something that will speak to somebody else and tell them the same basic concept? Because like I said before, I like the story that I'm telling to not be arbitrary. I like it to be extremely definite. There's an exact story that's going on here. It's not something like, oh, maybe it's this or that. Like, no, I'm telling you this, I'm showing you this. So I actually want to be very descriptive in the symbology that I'm using. And I most of the time, you don't have any alphabet to pull this graphic imagery from, so you have to just imagine it as best you can. So you're just kind of creating a language to talk to other people with, which I find extremely engaging. So I think like the excitement of the project kind of seeming interesting and valuable and valid kind of over time just help build up things. And the way that I make art, I don't actually know how it's going to look until put the whole thing together. Like a lot of my art, because it's made with machines, like I do all the design work first in pencil and paper, and then I do Illustrator or Fusion or something like a computer thing where it basically just looks like a 2D schematic. Like you still don't know what it's going to look like when you cut it out of like real world materials and start putting those things together. Do the colors suck? Do they look good? Do they, do they clash? Is this something that actually works? And then, you know, even as you're building it, like each piece you're putting it together, like it's almost like there's something off in the force until you have all your pieces put together. And sometimes you have to cut the same shit a whole bunch of times and different materials and see how it goes. And um, the process of creation, I think, is just so rewarding that's was what was driving me. And I had I had like sold art for a long time. I had basically been making and selling art since probably about 2008. I used to like make these little things for people's Christmas gifts, and then some people were like, "Oh, you should make these to sell them. They're really cool." And then I like basically went to a little music festival that happened near me with a bunch of these little art pieces, and people bought them all. So then that kind of started me on a little thing where ended up going to these big major music festivals and doing these really cool art kind of installations in the booths that we had with kind of create this little Mayan temple out of the booth. And so I kind of had like a sense of if I could make something cool, maybe somebody would buy it. So like the 7 months I was thinking like, hey, if I can pull this off, maybe it'll be worth it in some way financially. And if not, like at least I'll have something cool, which that to me is always the driving factor. It's like if you're going to make it, either someone will buy it, which helps you like create the next vision, like buy art supplies for whatever next thing you're going to think might be cool. Or if no one buys it, if you think it's cool, then you just keep it. Like, it's awesome. So then there's kind of no harm, no foul. So I think like that was basically my goal, and it was just driving me. It was like I kind of knew there was merit to the idea as I did the math, and the math came out right. Then I knew the art was going to start flowing.
And the outcome is spectacular and very distinctive, and you can spot it's a fractal encrypt a mile off. When your kind of art that the full node etc kind of blew up, that must have been an incredible feeling. What is it like for an art piece to be going for X amount, well, crazy amounts of Bitcoin? Were you incredibly surprised at that your art was so desired, this kind of piece that you've been as you say in your little workshop for 7 months, you've come out, and then this kind of huge kind of furore and people frantically trying to get hold of your art?
No, I still am waiting to wake up from the dream that must be occurring right now, to be honest. No, I didn't. But when I made the full node sculpture, I basically was talking to a friend of mine who's another very well known Bitcoin artist, and he was giving me a lot of advice. And I was saying like, well, like I worked 7 months on this. I want to charge a full Bitcoin. Do you think I could get away with that? And he was like, you definitely should charge a Bitcoin for that, and then you should make 10 of these. I was like, 10 of them? I was like, I just couldn't imagine that anybody would ever buy 10 of these things from me, like just not like possible. But I'm really thankful that he said that, because like that kind of probably transformed my whole, future. And so I basically had never sold a piece of art for more than what, like, I don't know, like $600, $700 was probably the most I had ever sold an art piece for before the Bitcoin full node sculpture. I had a lot of what I would consider success in the psychedelic art community, and kind of how you said that my artwork is recognizable. Like one of the things that I did with the music festivals was there's a really cool scene where everybody would set up these vending shops at hippie music festivals, but everybody would sell tie-dyes and pipes and things like that, and they were all kind of the same stuff. So I wanted to make something that was different, still kind of fit in, but something that was recognizably different. And certainly like the art that I did at that time, what was like that. And I had a lot of fun. Like I traveled the whole country, even the world sometimes, just with the art like as the vehicle, and it wasn't making a huge amount of money. It was just, I was selling like some pendants for $20 each, or some little laser cut designs that I made for maybe like $350 or $500 was a huge sale for me. So when I asked this guy, like, do you think I can sell one for one Bitcoin? And a Bitcoin at that time was like $8,000. Like, it was like extremely out of range for a piece of my art. So I was like, fuck it, I'll just try. Like, what can you only need one person to say yes. The whole world could say no. You just need one yes. Like, that's how art works. Like, you don't need the world to love your art. You just need one person to love it enough that's equal to the price that you think it's worth. Like, there's, and that person exists. It's just a matter of finding it. So what I did was I basically brought it to a conference that was near me, and it was called the North American Bitcoin Conference, and there was like very little Bitcoin at this conference. It was like mostly a shitcoin conference, but it was what went for Bitcoin conferences back in late 2019, early 2020. And basically, like, the first day of the event, a couple of people came up. They thought it was cool. I tell them, yeah, I want a Bitcoin for it, and they thought, okay, yeah, that's worth it. It's just I don't have a Bitcoin. And then one guy that I told, he said, oh, how much do you want? I said, a Bitcoin. He said, okay, I'll take it. I was like, seriously? He's like, yeah. I was like, okay. And he said, but I only have half of it now. Can I give you half now? And then, like, I'll come back and pay the other half later. And I said, of course, that's fine. Like, no problem. And so he walked away, and I gave a huge hug to my wife and whoever else was standing next to me. I was like, I can't believe this just happened. And then, since I had also posted the art on Twitter and other people had seen it, but it had sold so quickly, some people had messaged me and said, hey, will you make me one? And I said, yes, I will, but you gotta wait. It takes me like a couple months to make these things. So you could pay me a deposit now and I'll make it. And when I finish, you give me a small amount now. When I finish, you just pay me the rest. And a couple of people said yes. So I sold the second and third one like on that same day as I sold the first one, which was like, holy shit. And then I think shortly after that, like, my laser kind of broke. My laser's always breaking on me. It's like basically broken right now, but I could still work on it. And after the third one, my laser broke. And then I became dissatisfied with the art, meaning like I felt I could do a better job, even though it was a series of 10. I wanted to do, like, I felt like because they were laser cut, I could kind of, and individually made for each person, I could make each one different. So even though each of the first three were kind of set to different block heights, specified by the owner, they were kind of on the same vibe. I think I did make, if there's no way not to make changes. I'm like horrible with that. I like always want to kind of grow with each art piece. So everything, each new version of it was growing. But after I hit 3, I wanted to reimagine it. So I basically took another 7 months off. And at that point, I felt like obviously that was a valid decision, because last time I took off 7 months, I basically got 3 Bitcoin for it. So I could probably just do that again. And if I do a good job, then we'll see how it goes. So like I spent the 7 months like redesigning the artwork, and like I felt like I did a really good job, but still my laser was like not working. And it was actually seriously messed up at this point, like to the point where I just couldn't do anything on it. And Michael Saylor ended up buying his Bitcoin in September of that year, and I just felt like, and we started moving up the price from like 9,000, 10,000, and people were starting to say, oh my gosh, maybe we'll get 25,000 by Christmas and stuff. And I was like, if I don't hurry up and actually make some of this art, I'm not going to get any Bitcoin by the time it's done. Like, it's going to be so expensive. I'll just get a tiny amount. So I better hurry up and fix this friggin' machine. So I basically had to turn into a laser technician and just basically learn how to tear that machine apart up and down and fix whatever I needed to fix. And I had the design work done, and at that point, then I was able to make number 4, and number 4 was basically ready at the same time Genesis Day of the following year. So 2021, it took me a whole year to get to that 4th one, but it was like a huge difference, because not only did I redesign the artwork, but I had found a new lens for the laser. I basically had found that does a lot more detail. I used to use a 2.5-inch lens to do basically everything, and I found out that I could use a 2-inch lens. Now that half inch was like significant in the amount of detail that I could achieve. So that allowed me to actually push the level of detail that I put into the final product, because I always max it out. Like whatever my machine can do, we're always like working at the very edge of possibilities. So once I found that, I felt like I did a much better job. And so I think so then I put that one on auction, and that one did very well. But I guess like that was when Michael Saylor saw the sculpture, and basically he contacted me before the first one sold, and then kind of like made the deal for, or number 4 for the next one. So I was like, okay, cool. And so, but I was like really nervous with. I made the whole sculpture, and then I just wasn't happy with it. I was like, I don't think this one's good enough. So I basically just did the whole thing again. So I was like, and I think the second time was much better. I think that's a problem I have a lot, is a lot of times I'll do a piece, and I usually I don't finish the whole friggin' piece and then do it again. Usually I'm like much more economical, but like I said, sometimes you don't know how these things will look until you actually put them all together. You know, it's kind of conceptual until you actually have it in front of you. So once you see it, you either like it or you don't. And I just didn't feel like that one was the one. So I had to start over, but constantly like I'll cut stuff and redo it. And I always say like, hey, if I have to do it 3 times, that's okay, because, and I do a lot of shit 3 times, because the first one, okay, you're messed up. The second one, you get it, you know, like you actually have a good version, but now you know you could do better. So the third time you actually get it like really good. So that's kind of my process, is I don't mind wasting time and materials to get a good final piece, because I want to make something that people will literally hold for hundreds of years, and I just don't want someone to look in 100 years and think I'm a fucking idiot.
Hey, thank you so much for walking us through this. This has been amazing to learn how you are thinking this, and yeah, how you like the level of obsession that sometimes I feel like, am I like alone in this obsessed mind? Or and then I talk to other artists and I realize like we are all like this. Maybe some are more, some are less. Thank you so much. I wanted to ask you about the conference in El Salvador. If you could talk to us a bit about how is this planning going on, how do you feel about it, and if you can share about that.
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you for that opportunity. I think the what we're gonna do is we got a art gallery that we're gonna set up in the Bitcoin country in El Salvador at the Adopting Bitcoin conference next month, which is November 15th and 16th in San Salvador. And we have almost 50 displaying artists, and some of the artists are first time Bitcoin artists, so we're giving like a shot to some new artists, which is really cool. And we also have some kind of OG heavy hitters that have been in some other galleries with us and also displayed all over the world, so it's going to be really exciting. I got the opportunity to do my first art gallery for Madeira in Portugal, and I had never done anything like that before, and it was a huge amount of fun for me. I really learned so much and connected with so many people, and didn't have any intentions to do anything more than that. But after that happened, the people from BTC Prague asked me to uh, kind of help them with their art gallery. They said they had some art there the previous year, but they weren't really able to feature it the way they wanted, and kind of wanted some help from maybe somebody that was an artist to give them some tips there. So I went and I got a chance to go do that as well, which just stemmed directly from Madeira. And while I was in Prague, the guys from Adopting Bitcoin actually met up with me there, and they said, "Hey, would you be willing to do an art gallery, at our conference?" And I told them, I said, "Look, The only way I would do it is if you give us a prime location, because we have to, if the artists are going to be coming from all over the world and sending art, and it's a huge expense and risk for them. We have to be in a place where people see us, because a lot of times the art part of the conferences is neglected, or they'll put you in a weird place where it's not part of the flow of traffic. And that's one of the things I learned from my music festival days. You have to be where location. You have to be where the people see you, and you have to be where they're forced to walk past everything, because people get very tunnel vision at these events. Um, and the people and these guys understood. They said, look, we'll give you a great space, we'll put you right in the front, like you actually be in the main stage area, which I thought was super cool, because usually the artists don't get a chance to see the presentation. So this is the first time that the artists actually will get to see every single presentation on the main stage. They get to interact with all the attendees, like right there. There's nobody that has to, oh, I'm sorry, I have to go get to this talk. The people can actually talk to you because they can hear the talk at the same time. So I think it's a really cool setup and opportunity. And these all opportunities kind of come as a result of, I think, the proof of worth ethic of Bitcoin. It's like that, like we come there with no other idea but to just do a good job. Like our job, I think, is kind of putting in an art gallery at one of these conferences. Again, we're here to decorate the temple. Like this is the temple where we come to gather our people, and this is where the technical discussions happen, and this requires proper adornment. So I think that's being recognized, and I think their art is always a niche luxury good. So it's hard to sell in bear markets and stuff. But I think it's great that we always kind of have these like places within the culture that we can use to kind of showcase, hey, this is what people are inspired by and doing outside of the technical realm. Because I think the arts are a really interesting aspect of Bitcoin, in the fact that it's like a direct inspirational thing, but it has nothing necessarily to do with directly coding or development or promotion or any of that. It's really just something from the heart that you feel and you want to kind of bring out to the world. And so adopting Bitcoin gave us this opportunity, and they kind of acquiesced my demands, which I thought was cool. And the really neat thing about these conferences is that they force me to make art, and I do well with deadlines. Like if I have to do something by a certain date, like I can do that. If it's really open ended, I get very grandiose, and I have like a million huge projects that are so big that, like, yeah, it's in my sketchbook and I'm gonna do that. But then like when I have like, oh, well, I have to be here in 3 months, it puts kind of that time limit puts me in perspective. So I start thinking, well, what can I do for that? And all three times this past year have been extremely interesting results for me. Like the Madeira conference forced me to have a piece for that. I had already created two pieces in the series. It was called the Endless Bitcoin and Endless Chain of Mysteries. And I had already created number 1 and 2 of that, and this was going to be number 3. But since it was going to be in like a gallery that I was supposed to be curating myself, I wanted it to be really cool. So I had like totally redesigned it again. It took months to do the redesign. The way it came out, I thought was really cool. I was really pleased with it. And I think like that's the main thing for any art project that you do as an artist, is that you should just be really pleased with it when you do it. Probably a few years later, you should cringe a little when you see it and think you could do better. But at least when you make it, it should make you really like, wow, this is cool. And I did get that result all 3 times this year. So first I had the Endless Mystery sculpture. Then Prague, I basically was like, not even going to go, because I just had so many problems. But after Madeira, there was like a bunch of weird stuff, like customs basically seized my sculpture on the way out. And it was like really wild. And I wasn't even going to do Prague because I was all upset about this like nonsense. And then I kind of was like, okay, it came down to a certain weekend. I was like, if I don't have a design by the end of the weekend, I am not going to Prague, because like I don't have anything to bring. So I just sat there through the weekend and just see what I could come up with. And at the end of the weekend, I was like, oh, this is really neat. And actually, and then that's how I came up with the Codex 32 sculptures. And those manifested relatively quickly because of, again, the deadline. I was like, okay, I know I have to have them done by this date. And adopting Bitcoin was the same thing. It's like I had projects in mind. I have stuff that I want to do, but a lot of that's not realistic to do in a 3 month time. It may be multi-year projects. So I needed something for November, and you just come from zero, you don't have any idea what you're gonna do, to actually like having the idea. And when I saw it, it was like, this is really cool. Like I've actually been wanting to do this for a while. So I started like sketching in my sketchbook of what I thought the idea was. And I went back and flipped through other pages in my sketchbook, and I think that's one of the amazing things about having a sketchbook. It's one thing when we all do a lot of art on our computer and stuff, and you can browse through your computer and see stuff, but there's something about like turning the pages back, and I saw that I had a lot of similar designs in the past that had used basically what I created this time was like a fancy hourglass is what I made. And so I had a lot of hourglass designs in the past that I had in my sketchbook in different ways, like, oh, using it this way or that way or the other way. This was a new way that I hadn't seen before, but I had like a very definite vision of like what I thought might be cool. And then it just, it took me again, like probably more than a weekend this time, a couple weeks to probably like nail down what I thought might be a workable design. But once I actually like had that, then I built a prototype, because like sometimes you got to do that. You got to see what's what. So I built a prototype, and the prototype came out really cool. I was like, ooh, this is neat. And then as I was going, I actually wanted to use I really wanted to just make a super quick thing that I could send to El Salvador as a test shipment. That was the original idea. I didn't even want to make a production art piece. I just wanted to make something simple and quick that would go through customs, and we could test it out and see how how weird they are about having expensive art go through. But I wanted it to be a legitimate art piece, so I didn't want to just send anything. I have a bunch of half-made bullshit here, but my wife was like, "Why don't you just send some of this?" And I was like, "No, I want it to be like legitimately something I care about if they take it, you know, so that we could do a real test shipment." And because of that, the design just kept growing, and so like I kept redesigning parts as I was building. And oh no, this doesn't work, and this needs to be redone. And what was supposed to just take a week or two, I really never got my test shipment out. I just ended up just making the art piece and then building a crate and sending it. And I sent my art actually to a company that they're Bitcoiners, and they're actually just in El Salvador, and they had a local place not very far from my house, and they did a really good job shipping it. Because I'm really crazy with my art stuff. Like I think probably everybody is. You worry like once you already spent all this time making it, like as soon as it's out of your hands and you have no control over it, it's a little bit nerve wracking. So I over engineer my boxes and stuff, so or my crates, whatever I send the art, and I try to idiot proof it as much as possible, because you could just be guaranteed that some idiot's going to touch it. So I guess it just is what it is, but that's probably one of the most uncomfortable parts of any creation process for me, is like the time when it's not in your control, like the transit time. So like a lot of times I have stuff with me, but sometimes I have never really had this experience where I'm going out of the country where I live in. But now, yes, all three of these events where we did art galleries are out of the country I live in. So to display there, like it's you got to think through this stuff. And I hadn't done that before. So I think that's one of the other benefits, that as I do more of these galleries, I'm learning and things are getting a little better. It's still really tricky. We're still having customs problems with artists sending stuff in. And it just is what it is, I guess. Like we kind of got to get better at figuring out how to work in the fiat world, I think, as well. But one step at a time.
I can definitely confirm that Fractal Encrypt's crate surrounding his art is actually an artwork in itself. If it's anything to go by the Madeira, it is. I don't think a tank could take that out, to be honest with you, mate. It was.
Yeah, no, this new one's even worse. Yeah, my new shit's even worse, and I put wheels and everything on it. So
Incredible! It's a mobile
yeah,
art piece. Brilliant.
yeah, increase the idiot proofing.
Fantastic. If in case you're just joining us, you're listening to the Art of Freedom. This is the premier Bitcoin art show here on Twitter. I think it's probably the only Bitcoin art show as well. I always have to add that little caveat as well. And you're listening to Fractal Encrypt here with us today. The show, sadly, is almost coming to an end. Our time is almost up. Just looking at the comments section really quickly, we got some really lovely comments here. Boat Tipping Club, a true movement births a true culture around it. The fact that Bitcoin has art and music surround it, and glorifying it lends it massive credence to both outsiders and insiders alike. And so thank you very much for those words. If you wanted to get in touch with the show, you can just pop a message in the bottom right hand corner, or you can actually get a hold of us. We're also on Telegram group, and that's where all the artists hang out, and we talk and chat shit every so often as well. So come and join us over there. Fractal, let's say our time is almost up at an end, but what I really want to ask you is, what's this we talked about through this interview, this grand plan that you kind of have, and we've talked about it in person, about having a true place to worship Bitcoin, a church or something, for lack of a better word, a sacred place. What can we expect in the future from Fractal Encrypt? I'd be probably only thinking as far as the art gallery at the moment, but after that, where's it going?
Oh no, I'm not only thinking as far as the art gallery. We're definitely looking towards building the temple. That's 100% like my goal, as ridiculous as it seems or is to state that out loud. Like, I want to build a Bitcoin temple that is beautiful, amazing, in an awesome location, and acts as like basically a magnet for drawing in the best of Bitcoin and then reflecting that back out into the world and sending it back out to spread the good word in a sense. So I think, like, I've already acquired the initial artifact to build the temple around. Like, Druid, who is the second or third person to connect to the Bitcoin network after Hal Finney and Satoshi. We don't know whether he or Hal was second. He actually gave me the computer that he did that connect the second computer to connect to the Bitcoin network ever, and it mined like 77,000 Bitcoin, or held the keys to that. And I think he even wrote emails back and forth with Satoshi with this laptop. So I have that laptop, and my whole goal is to basically when I went to Prague and some of these places, I was learning that they would build these old Catholic churches, these basically massive things around the bones of dead saints. So my idea kind of stems from that. We don't have any bones of dead saints, but we do got this like computer, which is basically a sacred historical Bitcoin artifact. And so I think we can use that as our seed to then build the temple around. And from that, I think there's, like, realistically, the vision is very broad and goes a lot of places. I know we're kind of out of time here, but realistically, I see it as its own city-state temple fortress type thing, because number one, you have to be a fortress because people might want to fuck around. So you got to protect the temple as well. So you have to be a temple fortress that has, like, some bit of sovereignty, and you can defend your people and your Bitcoin and whatnot. But once you have the temple, you'll need people to care for the temple. So people will come, from around the world, but you'll have the monks, basically the Bitcoin monks, that will have to care for the temple. And so you have to create a sustainable living conditions. So you put the temple by, running water, a waterfall or something, so you can tap into the hydropower and mine Bitcoin. And now you're connected to the network as well as the global economy. And you can kind of bring abundance to the stranded energy places that we've been talking about, actually kind of live this out and show how, yes, you can turn the abundance of nature into abundance for humanity and actually live from the benefits of the bounties of nature without harming anything, and actually create some economies of scale. So then you bring in cattle and schools and other things like that, like actually create like a little, like how they had back in the day. You have like little shops that appear, and it becomes its own city and self-sustaining and its own economy and whatnot. all around the temple. And I think this is how things happened in the Renaissance times, and the happened in the past. We always kind of built towns around the temples. Okay, there's this sacred relic here, so this is where we want to be. We want to spend our time here. And then once you have that, you create all the best of, okay, this is where we teach the best Bitcoin coding, this is Bitcoin ethics, this is Bitcoin chip manufacture, this is Bitcoin chip design, this is like, all the ethics, the technologies, the ethos, and teach it here and send it out into the world so that they create other citadels, so that they have citadels all over the world like this that are temple, city, state, fortresses, and they all, we trade the monks back and forth between each other and all that. So sorry if we're going over time,
No,
but
that's fine.
that's the short version. Short version.
No, that's fine. I'll definitely trade you a Welsh monk for an American monk or an El Salvadorian monk. We could do that, some kind of exchange program. I would well up for that.
Nice.
That'd be cool. That well, as we probably could have gone on for longer, but just to say, and we'd love to have you back on the show as well at some point. Fascinating insights into your kind of creative processes and your vision for the future as well. So I'd really like to say from the Art Freedom crew, thank you very much for joining us on this wonderful occasion this evening, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Fractal Encrypt. Fractal, in case people don't know where to find you, where can they look at your art and perhaps discover more about your imagery and the workings of your pieces?
Oh, well, thanks again for having me on White Paper Day. Appreciate it. I pretty much only exist on Twitter. I do have a website, timechainartifacts.com, so you can check that out. I got some of my stuff there. It's not as extensive as I'd like, but there is certainly some of my art there. We're going to have the Adopting Bitcoin Gallery art will be at the website. It's not there now, but you'll be able to see that as we get closer to the event. And I was thinking that I have posted some of my earlier psychedelic art on my Twitter, so I'll probably try to dig up some of those old posts later this afternoon. I'll just retweet them. So if anybody's interested to see my old art, I do have some of it on Twitter, and I'll dig it up and retweet it for y'all. So if you're paying attention later, you'll be able to see it.
Thank you very much, Fractal Encrypt. Just before we go, Flo, who is our next guest then that we have on Monday?
Next week, we have our friend Modiotech with us. So we are very happy to learn more about his process and his art.
That is going to be awesome. Join us. We're normally on Mondays, so Monday evenings if it's GMT time, but I guess it's afternoons for everyone over in America and that area. You have been listening to the one and only Art of Freedom with myself, Rebel Money, and Florencia Montoya. All that's left to say is hope you have an amazing creative week and go out and create something awesome. Until Monday, we'll speak to you then. See you then.